My sister looked me in the eyes at Thanksgiving dinner and said, "Stop asking people for money. You need to learn how to stand on your own." Everyone at the table turned to look at me. They thought I was the one who couldn't manage my life. They thought I was the person who needed help, but they didn't know the truth. For the past 3 years, I was the one paying my sister's bills. I was the one keeping her $60,000 credit card debt a secret. I was the reason she still had a home, a good reputation, and a life everyone admired. And that Thanksgiving night, after she called me a burden in front of our entire family, I decided to show them every payment I had made, every dollar, every secret. And when my sister saw the records, she realized the person she was blaming was the only person who had been saving her. My name is Emily Carter, and that Thanksgiving dinner was the moment I finally stopped protecting my sister. For years, I believed family meant standing beside each other no matter what. I believed love meant helping someone when they were struggling. I believed the people closest to you would remember the things you sacrificed for them. I was wrong. Growing up, my sister Jessica was always the one everyone noticed. She was confident, outgoing, ambitious, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately made people believe she belonged there. Teachers loved her, relatives admired her. My parents constantly talked about how proud they were of her. Jessica knew exactly what she wanted, and she worked hard to get there. I was different. I was quieter. I liked staying in the background. I didn't need everyone's attention. I was the kind of person who noticed when someone needed help before they even asked. My parents used to say, "Emily has such a kind heart." At the time, I thought that was a compliment, but as I got older, I realized something. Sometimes being known as the kind 1 inch means people start expecting you to always give. Jessica became the successful daughter. She went to college, she built a career, she worked at a respected company. Every achievement became a family celebration. When Jessica got promoted, my mother called everyone, "She's doing so well. She's going places." We always knew she would succeed. I smiled every time because I loved my sister. I truly did. The problem was never Jessica's success. The problem was that my family only saw one kind of success, the kind they could show other people. A good job, a high salary, a title. They never saw the quiet things, the things nobody posted about, the things nobody congratulated, like the night Jessica first called me about her debt. It was almost midnight. My phone rang. When I saw her name, I immediately answered, because no matter what happened between us, she was still my sister. "Emily?" Her voice sounded different, not confident like usual, not the Jessica everyone knew. She sounded scared. I sat up. "What happened?" There was a long pause, then she said, "I messed up." Those 3 words immediately worried me. She told me she had fallen behind on her credit card payments. At first, she made it sound small, just a few missed payments, just a temporary problem. She said, "I'm going to fix it. I just need a little help getting through this month." I asked, "How much do you need?" She hesitated, then she said, $10,000. I remember looking at my bank account. $10,000 was not a small amount. It was money I had saved for my own plans, money I had worked hard for. But then I heard my sister's voice and I remembered all the time she had been there for me growing up. At least that was what I told myself, so I helped her. I transferred the money, and I told her, "Don't worry. We'll figure this out." She sounded relieved. She promised, "I'll pay you back." I believed her, but that was only the beginning. A few months later, another call came. "Emily, I hate asking this. I'm just in a difficult situation again. I helped. Then another month, another problem, another promise. "I just need a little more time. I'll get everything under control. This is the last time." But the last time never came. Over the next 3 years, the amount grew. $10,000 became $20,000, $20,000 became $40,000. And eventually, $60,000, $60,000. That was how much I had given my sister. I never told my parents, because I knew what they would say. They would be disappointed in Jessica, and I didn't want that. I didn't want my sister to lose the image everyone had of her, the successful daughter, the perfect daughter, so I stayed silent. I thought I was protecting her, but I didn't realize I was also protecting a lie, because while I was quietly paying her debt, Jessica was telling people a completely different story. She told relatives she was doing amazing. She talked about her career, her lifestyle, her independence, and everyone believed her. Meanwhile, I was the one checking my account every month, making sure her payments went through, making sure the credit card company didn't come after her, making sure nobody found out. The strange thing was, I didn't even feel angry, not at first, because helping my sister wasn't the painful part. The painful part was what happened later, the Thanksgiving dinner, the dinner where Jessica looked around the table and made everyone believe I was the person who needed help. That year, My mother invited everyone over, the house was decorated, the food was ready, everyone was in a good mood. Jessica arrived wearing a new designer coat. My mother immediately noticed. Oh my goodness, Jessica. You look amazing. Jessica smiled, thank you. It was expensive, but I think I deserved something nice. Everyone laughed. I said nothing, because I knew the truth, that coat was bought while she still owed thousands of dollars. Dinner started normally, people talked about work, family, plans, future vacations. Then my mother looked at Jessica. So how is everything going? Jessica smiled confidently. Honestly? Better than ever. Everyone looked proud, then she looked at me, and smiled. That was when everything changed. She said, you know, some people just need to learn responsibility. I looked at her. What do you mean? She laughed softly. I'm just saying. People can't keep depending on others forever. The table became quiet, then she said the words I will never forget. Stop asking for money. You need to learn how to stand on your own. Everyone looked at me, and in that moment, I finally understood. The person I had spent 3 years protecting was the same person destroying my reputation. I slowly put my fork down. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, because I knew something Jessica didn't. I had saved every record, every payment, every transfer, every message, and before that Thanksgiving dinner was over, my family was going to discover the truth. The moment I placed my phone on the table, Jessica's smile disappeared. For the first time that night, she looked nervous, not angry, not confident, nervous. My mother looked at me. Emily, what are you doing? I didn't answer immediately, because I knew once I showed those records, there was no going back. For 3 years, I had protected my sister. I protected her reputation. I protected her image. I protected the version of Jessica everyone loved. But that night, I realized something painful. I was the only person protecting her. She was not protecting me. I unlocked my phone, then I opened the folder I had never planned to show anyone. Inside were years of payments to bank transfers, credit card payments, screenshots of conversations, every time Jessica asked for help, every time she promised she would pay me back, every time I quietly saved her from another financial disaster. I looked at my sister. Do you remember the first time you called me because you couldn't pay your credit card? Jessica's expression changed a little, but she quickly recovered. Emily, this isn't necessary. I looked at her. No, it's necessary. Because for years, I had stayed quiet to protect her feelings, but nobody protected mine. I turned the phone toward my parents. This was the first payment. My father leaned closer. What is this? I answered, Jessica's credit card bill. The room became silent. My mother looked confused. What are you talking about? I took a breath. I paid it. Jessica immediately interrupted. Emily, stop. But I continued. I paid it because she was struggling. I didn't want anyone to know. My mother looked at Jessica. Is this true? Jessica looked uncomfortable. It wasn't like that. Those words hurt, because that was exactly how Jessica always explained things, not denying, not admitting, just changing the story. I scrolled through the records. This was the second payment. Then another, and this was the third. My father stared at the screen. How much is this? I looked down, then I answered, $60,000. Nobody spoke. The same family who had just listened to Jessica call me irresponsible was now staring at proof that I had been carrying her financial problems for years. My mother covered her mouth. 60,000? I nodded. Jessica finally spoke. I was going to fix it. I looked at her. I know. She looked surprised. I believed you every time you said that. That sentence hit harder than anger, because it was true. I wasn't angry because Jessica needed help. Everyone needs help sometimes. I was hurt because she accepted my help, then acted like I was the one who couldn't stand on my own. My father looked at Jessica. Why didn't you tell us? Jessica looked away. I didn't want anyone to worry. I almost smiled, because that was exactly what I had been doing, protecting everyone from the truth, but somehow, I became the person everyone judged. My mother looked at me. Emily. Her voice was different, softer. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at her, and for a moment, I wanted to say, because I knew you would finally see me. But I didn't. Instead, I said, because I thought family was supposed to help each other. Nobody answered. I continued. I didn't help Jessica because I wanted praise. I didn't do it because I wanted anyone to owe me. I looked at my sister. I helped because she was my sister. Jessica's eyes started filling with tears. Then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't know it was that much. That sentence hurt more than anything else, not because she didn't know the exact number, but because she didn't know the cost. She didn't know how many times I said no to things I wanted. She didn't know how many plans I delayed. She didn't know how many nights I worried about money. She only knew that I was there, and when someone is always there, people often forget they are sacrificing something. My mother reached for my hand. Emily, we never knew. I looked at her. I know. And then I said, that's the problem. Because the painful part was not that my family didn't know the details, the painful part was that nobody ever tried to know. For years, they saw Jessica's success, they saw the nice clothes, the career, the confidence. But they never asked what was happening behind the scenes. They never asked why I was always tired, why I was always careful with money, why I stopped talking about my own plans, because everyone was focused on the daughter who looked successful. Nobody noticed the daughter who was quietly holding everything together. Jessica lowered her head. I'm sorry. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw something different, not the confident sister everyone admired, not the person who always had the perfect answer. I saw someone who finally understood she had hurt me, but an apology was only the beginning, because there was something else Jessica didn't know, something I had never told anyone. The $60,000 debt wasn't the only thing I had sacrificed for her. Years earlier, I had given up something much bigger, something that changed the entire direction of my own life, and when my family learned about that, they finally understood how much I had lost trying to save everyone else. For years, my family thought the biggest difference between Jessica and me was ambition. They believed Jessica succeeded because she worked harder. They believed I stayed behind because I didn't want enough, but they never knew the truth. The reason Jessica had the freedom to chase her dreams was because I had given up mine. After Thanksgiving dinner, I went home feeling exhausted, not because of the argument, not because of the money, but because so many memories I had buried for years suddenly came back. I sat on my couch that night and opened an old box. Inside were things I hadn't looked at in a long time, old photos, old letters, and a university acceptance letter, a letter from the life I almost had. When I was 18, I had dreams, real dreams. I wanted to leave my hometown. I wanted to study art and design. I wanted to build something that was mine. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a future that belonged only to me. I remember holding that acceptance letter in my hands. I was so excited. I ran downstairs and showed my parents. My mother hugged me. My father smiled. For a moment, I thought they were proud. Then everything changed. A few weeks later, my father had a serious health problem. Suddenly, our family was focused on something else: hospitals, medical bills, appointments, fear. The dream I had been holding on to suddenly felt selfish. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one night. My mother was surrounded by bills. She looked exhausted. She said, "I don't know how we're going to manage everything." I looked at those bills, then I looked at my acceptance letter sitting beside me. That was the moment I made a decision. I gave up college. I told myself it was temporary, just 1 year, just until things got better, but life doesn't always give people back the time they sacrifice. I started working instead. A small job became a full-time job. One paycheck became another. I helped pay medical expenses. I helped with household bills. I helped my parents survive one of the hardest periods of their lives. Nobody forced me, nobody asked me to do it. I chose it because I loved them. But what nobody knew was that I was grieving too. Every time I saw someone my age leaving for college, I wondered what my life would have looked like. Every time someone asked, "Where are you going to school?" I smiled and said, "I decided to work for now." Nobody heard the sentence I never said. I had another choice. Years later, Jessica started law school, and that's when everything became complicated. My sister was chasing the future she always wanted, and I was helping her reach it. I remember the first time she called me. She sounded frustrated. "Emily, I don't know if I can continue." I asked, "What happened?" She told me tuition was higher than expected, her living expenses were increasing, she was thinking about quitting. I knew that feeling, the feeling of standing in front of a dream and wondering if you could afford to keep going, so I helped her again. I sent money. I covered expenses. I told her, "Don't quit. You're almost there." She cried, she thanked me, she promised, "I'll never forget this." At that moment, I believed her, because I didn't help Jessica because I wanted anything from her. I helped because I knew how painful it was to give up a dream. The difference was, I gave up mine, and I helped her keep hers. Years passed, Jessica became a lawyer, the entire family celebrated. My parents invited relatives over. They showed everyone pictures, they talked about how proud they were. My father said, "Jessica proved that hard work pays off." I smiled. I clapped. I celebrated with everyone else, but nobody knew that some of the money Jessica used to survive came from me. Nobody knew that while she was building her career, I was still wondering what my own life could have been. The strangest part? I never blamed Jessica. I want people to understand that. I wasn't angry because my sister succeeded. I wasn't jealous. I was proud of her. I truly was. The pain came from something else. The pain came from watching everyone believe her story was complete. When I knew there were missing pages, everyone saw Jessica standing at the finish line. Nobody saw the person who helped her get there. After Thanksgiving, my father asked me a question. A question I never expected. He said, "Emily, why didn't you ever tell us about college?" I looked at him, and I realized something. He didn't know, my own father didn't know how Much I had given up, I answered, because I thought you needed me. He looked heartbroken, then I added, and because I thought one day you would notice. The silence that followed was painful, because sometimes the hardest thing is not sacrificing for people you love. The hardest thing is realizing they never knew you sacrificed anything at all. That night, my family finally understood something. The $60,000 debt was only one part of the story. There was another debt. Point one. Nobody could calculate the years I lost, the dreams I postponed, the version of myself I left behind, and that was when my parents realized I wasn't the daughter who failed to build a life, I was the daughter who gave up pieces of her own life so everyone else could build theirs. After Thanksgiving, my family started looking at me differently, but the hardest part was I didn't know if I wanted them to. For years, I had wanted someone to notice. I wanted my parents to see the things I had done. I wanted Jessica to understand what I had given up, but when the truth finally came out, it didn't feel like winning. It felt like opening a wound that had been hidden for too long. A few days after Thanksgiving, Jessica called me. I almost didn't answer, not because I hated her. I didn't, she was still my sister, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I could keep pretending everything was okay. When I answered, there was silence, then she said, Emily. Her voice sounded different. What? I asked. She took a deep breath. I've been thinking about everything you said. I didn't respond, she continued. I didn't realize how much you did for me. I looked out the window, watching cars pass by, watching strangers live their ordinary lives, and I thought about how strange it was. My sister finally saw my sacrifices. Only after I had to prove them. I said, you didn't see it because you never had to. She became quiet, then she whispered, that's fair. That answer surprised me, because Jessica was usually the person who always explained herself, always had a reason, always had a way to make things sound less serious, but this time, she didn't, she just admitted it. I got used to you being there. Those words stayed with me, because they were exactly the truth. People don't always hurt you because they hate you, sometimes they hurt you because they become comfortable with your kindness. Jessica apologized, not once, not quickly, but over time, and that was something I noticed. A real apology is not just words. It's what someone does after the words are spoken. She started paying me back, not all at once, she couldn't, but she started. Every month, she transferred money to me, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it reminded her of what happened, because for the first time, she was taking responsibility. But my relationship with my parents was more complicated. My mother called me several times. At first, I ignored the calls, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed space. I had spent my whole life making sure everyone else was comfortable. I needed time to understand my own feelings. Eventually, I answered. My mother's voice was soft. Emily, I miss you. I closed my eyes, because part of me wanted to hear those words my entire life, but another part of me wondered, why did it take losing me for you to notice me? She said, I've been thinking about what you said. I knew exactly what she meant, the words I said at Thanksgiving, the words that changed everything. I thought family was supposed to notice. My mother started crying. She said, I'm sorry. 2 words, simple words, but powerful. I didn't cry out. I didn't tell her everything was fine, because it wasn't. I said, I appreciate you saying that, but I need you to understand something. She listened. I don't need you to feel guilty. I need you to see me. There was silence, then she said, I understand. And for the first time, I believed she was trying, but healing didn't happen overnight. There were still uncomfortable moments, there were still old habits. At family gatherings, relatives still asked about Jessica first. They still talked about her career, her achievements, her success, but something had changed. I no longer sat there hoping someone would notice me. I noticed myself. I started taking classes again, slowly. Point one course at a time. I started painting again, not because I thought I would become famous, not because I wanted to prove anything, because I loved it. For years, I had convinced myself that my dreams were less important because they didn't look impressive, but I finally understood. A dream doesn't become valuable because other people approve of it, it becomes valuable because it belongs to you. One evening, I showed my father some of my new artwork. He looked at it quietly, then he said, I forgot you were this talented. That sentence hurt, because it reminded me that he had forgotten, but instead of feeling angry, I felt free, because his opinion no longer controlled me. The old Emily would have been desperate to hear that. The old Emily would have thought, finally, I'm enough. The new Emily thought, I was always enough. That was the biggest change. I stopped trying to compete with Jessica. I stopped trying to prove I wasn't a failure, because I finally understood something. My life was never a competition between sisters. It was a story of 2 different people. Jessica built a successful career, that was her journey. I carried my family through difficult years, that was mine. One did not make the other more valuable, but there was still one thing left unfinished. My family knew the truth about the money, they knew about the sacrifices, but they still didn't know the full story. They didn't know the one thing I had never told Jessica, the real reason I kept helping her, even when it was hurting me, and when I finally told her, it changed the way she saw me forever. After I finally told Jessica the truth, something changed between us, not immediately, not magically, but something changed, for the first time in years. My sister stopped seeing me as the person who was always available. She started seeing me as a person with dreams. A person with feelings. A person who could also be hurt. A few weeks after that conversation, Jessica asked if we could meet, just the two of us. No parents. No family. No audience. We met at a small coffee shop near my apartment, the same kind of place we used to go when we were younger, for a few minutes. Neither of us said anything. It was strange, because Jessica and I used to talk about everything, but after years of hidden feelings, we had become strangers. Finally, she looked at me and said, I don't know how to fix this. I looked at her. What do you mean? She lowered her eyes. I hurt you. I stayed quiet, she continued, and the worst part is, I didn't even realize I was doing it. Those words were hard to hear, but they were honest. For years, I wanted Jessica to understand my pain, not because I wanted her to feel guilty, but because I wanted her to see me. I said, you know what hurt the most? She looked at me. It wasn't the money. She looked surprised. It wasn't even what you said at Thanksgiving. I took a breath. The hardest part was realizing you never wondered what I was carrying. Jessica looked down, her eyes became red. I thought you were okay. I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because that sentence explained everything. I know. I said, that's the problem. People often assume the strongest person needs the least support. They assume the person who always helps doesn't need help, but sometimes the person who looks the strongest is the person who has been holding everything together alone. Jessica apologized again, but this time, it was different. She didn't say, I didn't mean it. She didn't say, you misunderstood. She didn't say, but I was struggling too. She simply said, I was wrong. And for the first time, I believed her, but rebuilding trust took time, because trust is not repaired by one emotional conversation. It is repaired through small choices repeated over and over again. Jessica started changing the way she treated me. She stopped assuming I would always say yes. She stopped calling only when she needed something. She started asking about my life, real questions, not polite questions. How are your classes going? How is your artwork? What are you working on? At first, it felt strange. I wasn't used to someone being interested in my dreams. I remember one day she asked me, why did you stop painting? I looked at her, because nobody had asked me that question before. I thought for a moment, then I answered, because I thought it didn't matter. Jessica looked shocked. How could you think that? I laughed quietly, because nobody ever told me it did. That sentence stayed with her. A few days later, she sent me a message. It was a picture of a painting I had made when I was younger. One she had kept. She wrote, I always thought you were the creative one. I just never told you enough. I stared at that message for a long time, because sometimes the things we wait our whole lives to hear are the things people assume we already know. My relationship with my parents changed slowly too. My mother started making an effort, not perfect, but real. She stopped comparing me to Jessica. She stopped saying things like, why can't you be more like your sister? Instead, she started asking, what do you want? A simple question, but one I had rarely heard, because for most of my life, my decisions were based on what other people needed, what my parents needed, what Jessica needed, what the family needed. I had become so good at taking care of everyone else that I forgot to ask what I needed. That was the biggest change after Thanksgiving. I stopped seeing my kindness as a weakness. For years, I thought being kind meant accepting everything and being patient, forgiving everything, never saying no, but I learned something important. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-destruction. You can love your family and still protect yourself. You can forgive someone and still remember what happened. You can understand why someone hurt you and still decide you deserve better. Months later, my family had another gathering, the first one since Thanksgiving. When I walked into the room, I noticed something. Nobody looked at me like the quiet daughter anymore. My father introduced me to someone and said, this is Emily. Then he paused. She's an amazing artist. I looked at him, because those words meant something. Not because I needed his approval, but because I knew how hard it had been for him to finally see me. Later that evening, Jessica came over. She smiled. You look happy. I smiled back. I am. She nodded, then she said something I never expected. I used to think you were the lucky one. I laughed. Really? She nodded. Yeah. Because you always knew how to care about people. I looked at her. And I used to think you were the lucky one. We both laughed, because finally, we understood. We were never supposed to compete. We were just two sisters who spent years trying to become what everyone else wanted us to be, and maybe the hardest part of growing up? Is learning that you don't have to earn your place anymore, you already have one, but there was still one final conversation I needed to have, not with Jessica, not with my parents, with myself, because after everything that happened, I had to decide one thing: would I continue living as the person everyone expected me to be? Or would I finally become the person I was meant to be? For the first time in my life, I stopped asking other people what they thought I should become. I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped waiting for someone to tell me I was doing enough, because I finally understood something. My entire life, I had been searching for a place where I belonged, a place in my family, a place in my parents' hearts, a place where I felt just as important as Jessica. But the truth was, I didn't need to earn a place. I already had one. The only person who had forgotten that was me. After Thanksgiving, I started rebuilding my life, not dramatically, not with some big announcement, just small steps. Every day, I went back to painting. At first, it felt uncomfortable, almost strange. It had been so long since I created something simply because I enjoyed it. For years, everything I did had a purpose: work, bills, helping my family, solving problems. I forgot what it felt like to do something just because it made me happy. But slowly, I found myself again. I started taking art classes. One evening a week. Then, 2. I met people who knew nothing about my family. They didn't know Jessica was a lawyer. They didn't know I was the quiet daughter. They only knew me as Emily, and that felt freeing, because for the first time, I wasn't someone's sister. I wasn't someone's daughter. I wasn't the person who fixed everyone's problems. I was just myself. My parents noticed the change. My mother once told me, "You seem different." I smiled. "I am." She looked at me. "You seem happier." I thought about that. The old Emily would have said, "I'm happy because everyone is finally okay." But the new Emily answered differently, "I'm happy because I'm finally okay." My mother became quiet. I think that was the first time she understood. My happiness could not depend on whether my family was proud of me. It had to come from me. Jessica continued changing too. She paid back the money slowly every month. Every payment was a reminder of what happened, but she never complained. One day, I asked her, "Why are you still doing this?" She looked confused. "Because I owe you." I shook my head. "No, I mean, why are you really doing it?" She thought for a moment, then she said, "Because I don't want to be the person I was anymore." That answer meant more than the money, because I didn't need my sister to become perfect. I just needed her to become honest. Months later, something happened that I never expected. Jessica defended me. We were at a family dinner. A relative made a comment. They said, "Well, Jessica has always been the successful one." In the past, I would have stayed quiet, smiled, pretended it didn't bother me, but before I could say anything, Jessica spoke. "That's not fair." Everyone looked at her. She continued, "Emily gave up more than anyone knows." The table became quiet. She was there for me when nobody else knew I was struggling. Jessica looked at me. She never needed to prove her worth. She was already the strongest person in this family. I didn't know what to say, because for years, I had wanted someone to defend me, but what surprised me was, I didn't need it anymore. I appreciated it, but I didn't depend on it. That was the difference. I had changed. I no longer needed someone else to tell me I mattered. I already knew. A year after Thanksgiving, my father and I had a conversation. We sat outside my apartment, just the two of us. He looked at me and said, "I wish I had seen you sooner." I looked at him. "I wish you had too." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I'm sorry." This time, I accepted it, not because the past disappeared, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because I finally understood forgiveness. Forgiveness is not pretending something didn't hurt. Forgiveness is choosing not to let that pain control your future. I forgave my family, but I also forgave myself for staying silent, for giving too much, for believing I had to earn love, because the person I needed to forgive most was myself. Looking back, I sometimes think about that Thanksgiving night, the night my sister tried to make me feel small, the night my family finally learned the truth. At the time, I thought it was the worst moment of my life, but now, I see it differently. That was the night everything changed. That was the night I stopped living for everyone else and started living for me. But there was still one thing I needed to understand. The biggest lesson from everything that happened was not about money. It was not about my sister. It was not even about my family. It was about something much deeper. It was about finally understanding my own worth, and once I learned that, nobody could ever take it away from me again. A year after that Thanksgiving dinner, I stood in my kitchen holding a cup of coffee. The morning sunlight came through the window. Everything looked ordinary, but I felt different, because for the first time in my life, I was not waking up wondering if I was enough. For years, I measured my worth through other people's opinions. My parents' approval. My sister's success. My family's expectations. I was always asking myself, am I doing enough? Am I making them proud? Am I disappointing someone? I spent so many years trying to prove that I deserved to be seen, that I deserved to be appreciated, that I deserved a place in my own family, but eventually, I learned something important. I was never invisible because I had no value. I was invisible because people stopped looking. After everything happened, my family changed, but not overnight, not perfectly. Real healing does not happen because someone says sorry once. It happens through actions, through consistency, through people proving they truly understand the damage they caused. My mother changed first. She stopped comparing me to Jessica. She stopped seeing Jessica as the daughter who succeeded, and me as the daughter who simply helped. She started asking about my life. My dreams. My plans. One day, she called me, not because she needed something, not because there was a problem. She simply asked, "How are you, Emily?" That question was so simple, but it meant more than she realized, because for most of my life, people asked what I could do, not how I was. My father changed too. A few months later, he visited my apartment. He looked around, at my paintings. My books, the small things that represented the life I was finally creating for myself. Then he smiled and said, "I should have been proud of you years ago." I looked at him. He continued, "I was so focused on seeing who was successful, I forgot to see who was strong." Those words stayed with me, because for years, I thought strength meant staying silent. I thought strength meant carrying everything without complaining. I thought strength meant never needing anyone, but I learned something different. Real strength is not pretending you never hurt. Real strength is knowing you deserve better. Jessica changed too, but our relationship was never the same, and honestly, I was grateful for that, because the old relationship was built on expectations. She was the successful sister. I was the helpful sister. She was the person everyone admired. I was the person everyone depended on, but the new relationship was different. It was built on honesty, respect, and understanding. Jessica continued paying back what she owed me, but the money was never the most important part. The important part was that she finally understood the sacrifice behind it. One evening, she called me. She said, "Emily, I used to think you helped me because you were stronger than me." I smiled. She continued, "But now I understand. You helped me because you loved me." I was quiet. Then she said, "I'm sorry I made you feel like your kindness was weakness." That apology meant something, because she finally understood being kind was never my weakness. The mistake was believing I had to keep sacrificing myself to prove I loved people. Looking back, I sometimes think about the girl I used to be, the 18-year-old girl holding a college acceptance letter, the girl who gave up her dream because she thought love meant putting everyone else first. I wish I could go back and talk to her. I would tell her, "You are not less important because someone else shines. You do not have to disappear so someone else can succeed. You do not have to sacrifice your entire life to prove you are a good person." Because that was the biggest lesson I learned. Being needed is not the same as being valued. For years, I thought my biggest mistake was helping my family too much, but now I understand, helping people was never my mistake. Loving my family was never my mistake. The mistake was forgetting to love myself. Today, when I look back at that Thanksgiving dinner, I don't only remember the pain, I remember the moment I finally found my voice. The moment I stopped letting other people define me. The moment I realized I didn't need to compete with my sister, because my life was never a competition. Jessica had her journey, I had mine. Her success did not make me a failure. My sacrifices did not make me less important. We were simply two different people trying to find our own way. The biggest surprise was the moment I stopped trying to prove my worth, was the moment everyone finally started seeing it. But by then, I no longer needed their approval, because I already knew the truth. I was never the failure daughter. I was the daughter who carried more than anyone knew. I was the daughter who stayed when things were difficult. I was the daughter who loved without expecting anything back. And I was the daughter who finally learned that my value was never determined by how much I could sacrifice. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people closest to us. Sometimes the people who know our story the best are the ones who fail to understand us. But eventually, the truth finds its way out, and when it does, you have a choice. You can continue living as the person others expect you to be, or you can finally become the person you were always meant to be. And after years of putting everyone else first, I finally chose myself.